It's not actually an HMD. This is just a prop, but we'll pretend like HMDs are actually comfortable enough to use over an extended period of time. Let's do this. Okay, the HMD is on and I am now in my virtual operating system environment. There's not too much to see right now because this is just a login UI. However, my input devices, at least, are still here with me. In fact, they're in the same exact location where I left them on my desk. And even as I grab them and move them around, because they're tracked in space, their virtual representation will follow along. I can do that with the mouse, I can do that with the keyboard. You can also see that I have a mouse cursor here, and that really works just like any mouse cursor you're used to. When I move my mouse forward and backwards, the cursor goes up and down. When I move the mouse sideways, the cursor goes left and right. And even though this is a 3D, 360-degree environment, I can do this anywhere. Wherever I look, the mouse still just behaves like a simple 2D mouse. And this was so important to me because I wanted it to be easy to pick up. I wanted anybody to be able to come in here and just start using the system, not having to learn some sort of new 3D input devices. Now let's click on this guest profile here. And as I look down at the keyboard, you'll see that it can actually sense where my hands are even before I touch any of the keys or I press anything. This is super helpful for just placing my hands on the keyboard correctly, especially for people who might be a little bit less confident in typing, who might be going one finger at a time. They can really go with absolute pinpoint accuracy and really hit the right keys. And not only that, this text input viewfinder here also helps me to see what I'm typing immediately down at the keyboard. So I don't have to type something anymore and then look up and make sure that what I typed is correct. I can just go down here and see exactly what I'm typing right where I'm typing it. All right, now let me click here and log in. So this takes me to the default work environment. Right now it's empty, no apps or no content is open. I'm surrounded by this 3D, pretty calm landscape. My input devices are still here. I can still move my mouse around. I can still grab my keyboard. And then here I'm surrounded by what's arguably the most important UI component of this operating system. I call this the bridge, and you're going to learn a lot about it over the course of this entire walkthrough. For now, let me just introduce how some of the basics work. If I want to launch anything, I click here on the launcher. I get access to everything that I have on my computer right from here. Let's open a browser window, music, mail, folder, photo. And all these things just open right in front of me. And the way that they open is probably pretty familiar to you. Most of these things just look like what you're used to. This is a folder. These are my emails. All of these things still exist in this operating system. Just because this is VR doesn't mean that I can still just have a folder window that shows my files. Ultimately, this is still just a computer that's supposed to be as useful as any computer that you're using today, or ideally more useful. Everything also open in these simple 2D windows. And that's because my job here was not to reinvent what every possible app would look like in an immersive environment. I was more interested to see how the apps that I already love using today could become more useful in this fundamentally immersive 360-degree environment, how my workflows could change, and some of the challenges that I would have to overcome to make all of it work in here. So I have my mouse and my windows. So there's no surprise that I can also just grab something and move it around anywhere I want in the workspace. I can go extreme. I could go all the way behind me, or I could go all the way above me if I wanted to. This workspace here is really completely freeform. Now, I can also take any window and move it down into the bridge. In the bridge, things work a little bit differently. You can see that windows kind of snap into one of these 6 available slots down here. This is just so that the bridge stays a bit more organized in order to avoid content clashing with my input devices here. So everything kind of neatly lines up. When I look away from the bridge, you can see that the windows that are in it fade into the background. This is a small notion of allowing me to focus on one area at a time. And this is really it for the absolute basics, right? I have my input devices that are, now I lost tracking of my mouse. Oh, here it's back. I have my input devices that are easy to use, right? I have something that I can use for pointing and for moving things around. And by the way, I can move around this window 180 degrees around me. And all I'm doing is moving my wrist, right? And this speaks again to the fact that I want this to be a comfortable all-day experience. I want to be able to use this system all day long for any important task. So I don't want to get up and have to reach over in order to grab a window and then move it over here. I want to be able to do that as comfortably as I'm interacting with my software today on my desktop or on my laptop. So I have my input devices, I have ways to display content, I have ways to organize my workspace. Now let me take you to a new scene where I've prepared some more content that's a bit more closer to what I imagine an actual workflow to be like. Cool. The workspace is empty again, but down in the bridge you can see I already prepared a couple of apps. Now, all these apps, as you'll see in a second, are not the primary reason why I'm using the computer. All of these apps are important to me throughout the day, but kind of only in the background. So I put them in the bridge so that they would be slightly out of the way, but always easily accessible, including this tennis match that I'm just kind of casually watching on the side. Let me get that playing. When I click on the video player, the keyboard layout completely changes to a play pause button, meaning I can press anywhere in the keyboard now and just get that going. Cool. Now let's open some content that I'm actually going to be working in. Everything here opens on a pile again, but that's just really to demonstrate that this is what things would probably look like on a monitor today, right? The more windows you use, the more you have to switch around between them. But here, of course, I can now just grab everything and lay it out pretty neatly side by side and avoid any sort of overlaps. Down here, by the way, I also have a little app switching UI that allows me to quickly bring anything to the foreground in case something is hiding behind something else. In this scenario, I'm working on a kitchen remodel. For that, I have plenty of different documents open, and now I have laid them all out neatly around me. Of course, there's still a concept of ergonomics in here where the main thing I want to work on should be in front of me, where it's most comfortable to work in over an extended period of time. In this case, I'm working on this plan drawing in Photoshop. And so even though I don't recommend working on something that's 90 degrees off to your side here, it's still super helpful to have all these things visible and available at any time. For example, if I wanted to make sure that this faucet and this sink are the same ones in every one of my drawings, all I would have to do is check here, compare it here, and then here and here in these 3D models. I just did this across 4 different windows without a single click, without hiding or showing anything, without minimizing windows, without using a multitasking UI or anything. I'm just having a quick look. Now imagine this over the course of an entire workday, how many clicks you don't have to do, how many times you don't have to manage around some windows, how many times you're not just busy managing your workflow as opposed to just doing your work. And now maybe it also makes a bit more sense why I have these apps here down in the bridge. Of course, I could also have my emails up here and my calendar over here, but this would just add more ambiguity to the space up here. I really love just having content that relates to a single task up in this workspace. And at any time I need to access my messages or an email comes in, I can just look and deal with it right here. And these windows, by the way, they're full-sized windows, right? This is an actual email window that I could absolutely do my emails in. So this is not just some sort of minimized version that's not really functional. When an email comes in, I can just look at it, see who it's from, see what it says, and immediately reply from here if I want to. I don't necessarily have to deal with a separate notification UI, open or close any other apps. Now, what if I want to move on from kitchen remodeling and do something else temporarily? Of course, I could just close all these windows here and open new apps, or I could just open additional apps in the same space on top of everything else. But I really like that now I have organized the space. Next time I want to come back to kitchen remodeling, I want to also come back to this space the same way that I left it. So I implemented the concept of multiple virtual workspaces. This allows me to separate different tasks across different workspaces. And because every workspace is so big, I can really enclose a single task in its entirety in one workspace. In this case, I have 3 open already. So each workspace, like the one I'm currently in, has its own little app switcher. And that's not only useful when I'm actively working in a workspace, but it's also useful to see what's open currently in the other ones. Here, I was really lazy with the labeling. It's just 1, 2, 3, but in theory, this workspace could be called kitchen. And then this workspace that I can just easily switch over to could be called camping, because here I'm planning a camping trip. And of course, a camping trip requires totally different things than a kitchen remodel. So it's great that this workspace just has things separate from this one. Now, as I switch between these workspaces, something doesn't change. And that's everything that I have down here in the bridge. And this is probably its most important aspect. Everything that I have in the bridge stays with me at all times. So the bridge really travels with me to whatever other destination or to whatever other workspace I go to. Even more so now, it might make sense why I have my emails or my calendar down here, because they are very important to me no matter what else I'm working on. I'm going to want to check on how my day is progressing and when my next meeting is coming up, whether I'm messing around planning a camping trip or very seriously remodeling this kitchen. And because these things are always down here with me, I'm almost developing some sort of intuitive reflex for interacting with some of these apps down here. Let's say a song comes on that I don't like. It's completely second nature now to just go down here and skip this song. My music is always going to be to my bottom right here. So I can so intuitively just go there and do this. A new email comes in, I'm just going to check down here. A new message comes in, I check over here. But this type of spatial organization is not only helpful as it relates to things I have in my bridge, it also helps me interacting with my content so much more naturally up here in the workspace. So I've been looking at itineraries for my camping trip for quite a while, and I want to take a break from looking at this map. Instead, I want to look at campgrounds for now. So what can I do with this map? Well, I could close it, of course, that's what I would do today, or minimize it, or just push it into the background. But here, I can just take it and move it over to the side. Right, and now I'm just going to take this blog post and maybe put it front and center and start reading this article. My map, however, it's still here. It still reminds me that I can come back to it. I maybe need to come back to it because I still need to make a decision. And if my blog post here mentions any sort of location that I want to look up, I can just quickly glance at the map here and make sure that I know what I'm reading about. This is so simple, and it feels so powerful to apply a certain meaning to an object just by moving it over to the side. This is pretty much like we work in physical spaces, whether it's a kitchen or a workshop or just a desk, right? We take objects, and when they're less important to us at the moment, we move them over to the side. We don't always put them completely away, but if we move them to the side, we know, oh, we're going to come back to this, but not right now, and then we can focus on something else. Initially, when I started working on this concept, I thought that it was going to be overwhelming to be surrounded by so much content, by having so many things open at the same time. But the more I've been testing it, the more I'm realizing that I actually feel more natural in here because I'm so much more casually working with my content. When I'm on my normal computer, I'm doing so much work just making sure the right window is at the screen at the right time for me to do something. In here, I'm just casually moving things around. Maybe I put something on a pile over to the side, no problem. I can even do things like this, where here's a little tag that I prepared earlier. You can imagine you just create that by typing a word on the keyboard and you pull it out. And then you have this little tag here. It's like a post-it note that you can stick anywhere. And I created this to remind myself that I need to look up where to stop for coffee on the way to the camping grounds. Where am I going to put this reminder? Well, maybe just on the map itself, right? And this sticker doesn't have any meaning to the browser window itself. It just has meaning to me, but that's enough. For me, this is enough of a reminder for later. So again, I'm just extremely casually working with this content, and it makes my life just a little bit easier. Let me show you another little detail benefit about having so much space in here. This browser window specifically, where I have 3 tabs open that I would like to really compare side by side. Well, because I have all this space here, I can do something as simple as this. I press on this button, the 3 tabs, they just open side by side. Now I can quickly compare these 3 tents, all of their specs, and then just close this again. Again, I wouldn't necessarily recommend always having all of your tabs open and then working in a tab over here that's so far to your side that I basically have to swivel my desk chair around. But for a quick glance, this is totally enough, and it's so helpful to be able to do this. And this is also just a small example for how something as simple as a 2D browser window could now start innovating based on the fundamental properties that this operating system environment provides. Now, let me take you to the third workspace here. In this one, I'm going very experimental with how I use the space. Okay, you can see that here I'm not necessarily laying out a bunch of windows that all relate to the same task. Here instead, I'm creating piles of things that I want to keep track of. And I'm using these post-it notes that I just temporarily created to subdivide this space just for myself. So let's make this a pile of things that I need to read. This is for things I need to reply to, and this is for things that I need to check up on after work. And now, just by using these 3 text labels, I have completely created new meaning in this space specifically for myself. This is not anything that is specifically built into the operating system as functionality. It's just me using the items that I have available anyway, which is content in Windows plus space. So anything that I have in the window, I can now put on a pile, of course. And by putting it here, it means that, oh, you still need to have a look at this. So let me look at this newspaper clipping here. Okay, read through this email quickly, not email, website. And then this email here, that's really important. And I want to reply to this later. So what do? Do I tag this in the email program, or do I add this to a to-do list app separately? No, because here I can just take this and move the window to a new spot in the space. Now it's on my reply pile, and I know exactly what that means, right? I completely changed the meaning of this window by moving it from one spot to another. And there's really nothing that feels more natural than doing that. That's exactly how I would work with documents if they were lying on my desk in front of me. Okay. These were a couple of examples for what working in here could look like using 2D content by yourself. Now I have two more examples that I want to show you. The first one is going to be all about 3D. And then the second one is going to go back to a 2D use case, but it'll bring a second person in to collaborate with. So let's talk about 3D. You can see that I cleared the workspace again. I still have my apps in my bridge, and I have loaded this 3D model of the kitchen I was remodeling earlier in the workspace itself. Let's move the bridge out of the way, actually, to give us better view onto the 3D model itself. I'm going to use my very crude 3D viewing UI here to move and spin around the 3D model. I admit this 3D model is pretty awful, but it's going to do for now. And this is not really a demonstration of what I imagine 3D modeling should look like in this operating system. Because 3D modeling is going to be a huge use case for these types of systems. VR headsets, because of their stereoscopic properties, they're extremely good at showing you 3D content. You can really tell the scale, the proportions, the dimensions. You can feel them very naturally as compared to just flat on a screen. So this kitchen, for example, is actually 1-to-1 scale. This is the same size it would be if it was real. So it gives me a really good idea of what it feels like to stand in this kitchen. And I say stand in this kitchen, and I really mean sit in this kitchen, because I'm still seated at my desk, right? There's no need for me to get up just because I'm 3D modeling something really big. I can still navigate that just using my keyboard and my mouse. If this is not a proposal for 3D, what 3D modeling should look like in here, why am I mentioning this? Well, this is an operating system, and in an operating system, eventually, I'm also going to be dealing with 3D content. And if I want to be able to display 3D content in ways like this one, I'm going to have to figure out what ramifications that has onto the rest of the system. And so this is an interesting area that I wanted to explore. As long as I'm just spinning around my 3D model here, no problem, right? I have some apps up here in the bridge. I'm looking at my 3D model down here. But if I want to start editing this 3D model, I'm going to need a bit more than just the model itself. If I can pull up the screenshot of this 3D modeling software here, this is a great 3D modeling tool for 2D monitors today. But you can see that there's not only the 3D content itself, there's also all of these tools, all these functions, command lines, property panels. All of this is what actually lets you use the program. So where is all of this stuff in here? And so this is where it becomes interesting, because let's say we open tools and properties. Here's also a reference image for this faucet. Just close that for now. Let's say these tools and properties now, they're just open in another window, right? This window works just like this email window from before. They just move on the same plane, behave exactly the same. So this is totally fine, it seems, as long as I'm looking at it in this area where the 3D model doesn't have any geometry. But as I start moving and spinning around the 3D model, you can see that inevitably this window is going to start sticking into the 3D model. And this happens completely naturally, because the window is about 2 meters away from me in this virtual space. This is a number that I picked. It doesn't have to be 2 meters. But because this is 2 meters away from me, it's going to intersect with my kitchen, which is anywhere from 0 to something like 4 meters away from me. So at the 2 meter mark, this window is just going to slice through my 3D model. And now I have the problem that either I can't see what's behind the window, or I can't really see what's in the window if I'm looking at it through the 3D model. Because I might be really in the weeds here, sticking my head into the sink. I don't want to look at my tool panel like this. Worst case scenario, something like this happens where some really important part of my geometry is just halfway sliced up by the window. Right, so this is not going to work. Now I could move the window up in the bridge here. Let me just bring the faucet back here. So now let's say I'm editing this faucet. And it's right here. This is where it feels quite natural for me to look and make changes. But now every time I want to click on a different tool, I need to look at essentially the ceiling. If I have to do this more than 5 times in a row, going from here to here to here to here, this is not going to be comfortable. So even though the bridge is a convenient place, because you can see that the 3D geometry doesn't overlap with the bridge, whether it's above or below me, it's not a convenient location to put something as important as a tool panel. So what do I do here? Well, I came up with this first possible candidate of a solution. Let me just pull that up here. You can see that this looks very similar to this window. But these panels here, and I'm calling them panels because they behave differently, and I want to make the distinction between what is a window and what is a panel. This panel over here, it behaves quite differently from the window itself. So right now, I have selected a part of this faucet for editing. As I move the faucet further away from me, you will see that this panel here, even though it still looks pretty much the same as just before, now the panel is almost as far back as the faucet itself, almost as far as this window. Now when I move the faucet closer to me again, you'll see that the panels themselves are also significantly closer to me. So you can see that these panels, they move with the 3D geometry. Specifically, they adapt to moving to a similar location as the part that I clicked on and that I'm editing. So this way I can now, let's get this out of the way a little bit. Now this way I can now edit this part here, and I can just go back to the tool, change tool, make an edit, look at the properties, edit something here, change something in the geometry, etc., etc. If I need to make sure that I can see a different part, let's say my panels are in the way of looking at something else, I can just move them over here. But they stay close by. They now don't move on this big arc around me. They just move on this like really small scale that relates much better to the part that I'm actually editing. So let's close this one altogether. And while I still have things like my emails or let's say this tennis match, so because these are not related to the 3D modeling use case, they still behave separately. And yes, they still suffer from this problem that they're occluding some of my 3D geometry or that they basically become really hard to look at. But yes, this problem might just continue to persist. And it's my choice whether or not I want to intermix my emails with my 3D geometry. Otherwise, I can always move them up here. Oh, sorry, these are not my emails. This was my calendar. I mean calendar. All right, so now let's move on to the final scene where I want to show you what it's like to collaborate with somebody in this operating system. So once again, my workspace changes. I have a few different apps in my bridge now, and then up here, I'm implementing a new website layout. But as opposed to before, now I'm not working on this by myself. I'm collaborating with a designer. She's halfway across the country. So we usually only rarely get a chance to hang out in the same space. But VR is so good at transporting you to a different location. In a way, I am also in a different location now that I'm in here, right? This space doesn't relate to my physical office or the physical room that I'm sitting in at all. So I could just as well be half across the world from this virtual environment. So there's no problem to bring her in here to join me. Well, luckily, that type of collaboration is built into this operating system from the ground up. And I'm going to show you how that works right now. So I can give her a call, and as she picks up, she appears right next to me in the space. You can see that she uses the same system. So she's surrounded by her own bridge, and she's using apps in her own workspace. And because she's also wearing an HMD, her head is tracked, and I can see her motion conveyed via her avatar. Right now, I can't see what she's working on, and she can't see what apps I have open. This is because we're just in a sort of co-working mode. But it's great to convey the feeling of being on the same team and just hanging out in the same space. Now, if we want to work more closely together, we can actually merge our workspaces. Check this out. All right, so now I get to see what she's working on. She gets to see what I'm working on. Not only can we see each other's work, I can actually take any one of my windows and now seamlessly move it over into her space. It's as seamless as moving around windows in my own space earlier. If I wanted to ask her a question about the layout that I'm implementing as she is designing it, I could just take my window and move it over to her, right? And she could just have a close-up look right over there. And then I could just take it back. Similarly, I could just have a quick look at this document that she prepared over here that has some new color values for our website. And I can take these values over here now and just make sure that I quickly compare them with what I have in my code. Then I can just move the window back again. Or because I know that she's into tennis as well, maybe I can just drag out this video and then put it in a location where we can both watch at the same time. And so I did all of these things without thinking about screen sharing, video calls, file sharing, screenshotting and sending each other emails, etc. We're just doing all of this based on the same exact rules that were just established in all these use cases where I just worked by myself. Really, I'm just moving around windows in a workspace. This is the first time that collaborating across two computers feels so completely natural. And this is a huge game changer because we're not only collaborating in apps that have collaborative features integrated, we're collaborating on our entire workflow across apps, across documents, really completely fluidly, however we feel like it, however it makes sense for us, not how somebody else determined for us. And then finally, there's a third step of collaboration that I call over the shoulder. Self-explanatory because I'm bringing my friend here behind me and she can glance at exactly what I'm looking at from behind me over my shoulder. She even gets a little pointer that allows her to communicate more easily and help me to point things out in the apps that I have open. And who knows, maybe she could actually start editing my code in my windows. I mean, there's really no limits. Now imagine what this could bring to workers in remote locations. For the very first time, being remote doesn't necessarily feel like a significant step down from being there right in the physical space. Everybody can just participate, whether or not they're at the main office or a satellite office or pretty much anywhere else in the world. All right, this concludes the walkthrough of VROS. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, I'd love to hear in the comments because I'm planning to make plenty more videos about different details that I didn't get to talk about today. There are many solutions and implementation challenges that I'd like to talk about. If you have anything specific that you want to know about, I would love to address it in upcoming videos. Make sure to keep an eye on my channel. This has been super fun. I'm looking forward to the next one already. See ya.